Everything okay? C'est bon?
C'est reparti.
Okay, everything appears to be working. I'll start again. Honourable Chair, Commissioner, European MEPs, parliamentary deputies and COSAC members. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted that we have an opportunity to have this parliamentary exchange on the Conference on the Future of Europe. Some might think this is unusual, seeing as our conference intended to ensure that European citizens' voices be heard through various organised events and panels and conferences. And some might say that although national parliaments weren't involved at the start, they were only observers, we should not forget that we represent our citizens. It is our duty to listen to them, to find out what they expect of Europe and the European Union, and to listen to their concerns and their doubts. I think this conference on the future of Europe, the future of the Union, and the first input we've had from our citizens is particularly valuable. We started our processes with working parties and then plenary sessions to discuss our citizens' input. And as a member of this process in France, I hope that we will be able to add to the discussion with our debate today, and we hope it will have an impact on the future of Europe. And our work will go beyond the end of this conference, and of course each national parliament will go away and work on this. Thank you. Thank you very much. And before handing over to the next speakers, I suggest that we have the President of the European Commission, a video message from Ursula von der Leyen.
Président Rapin, Président Tilay, national parliaments, dear friends. This is a watershed moment for Europe. The attack against Ukraine is an attack against the basic values our union is built upon: freedom, democracy, self-determination. And Europe is responding to this attack with unprecedented unity. We are standing together at the side of our Ukrainian friends. We have put together the largest sanctions package in our history. We're taking greater responsibility for the security of our continent. Our response to this aggression can rewrite the future of Europe. And in times like these, it is more important than ever to listen to European citizens. And this is also the raison d'être of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is now in full swing. The conference is a new and different way of connecting to European citizens, especially men and women who had never engaged with Europe before. It was amazing how much enthusiasm the conference has raised among the people who are taking part. Some of them have recalled during the conference sessions how surprised they were to receive this unexpected phone call from the European Union. Some thought it was some kind of commercial call or maybe a prank from a friend, but it wasn't. It was for real. The European Union has truly reached out to thousands of Europeans who never thought about getting involved in our union's decision-making. It seems we have been able to connect with men and women in the silent majority. Take Ludmila, a retired lady from Czechia. When she first spoke in a citizens' panel, she explained, and I quote, "The EU seems distant in the daily lives of our member states, but here I really feel a European citizen." Or take Rune, a Danish man, shared a very similar experience in his working group. He said, and I quote, I was skeptic about Europe, but now, by discussing with you, listening to you, I'm finally able to see what an important difference the EU can make. The conference has involved people of all ages and from all walks of life. It has given voice to their ideas, sometimes to their criticism, and their suggestions on how to improve our union. It is an unprecedented experiment in European democracy. Beaucoup d'entre vous qui sont...
Many of you who are attending today have been actively involved in this conference, either as members of plenary sessions or by organising events in your regions. And I'm sure that you share my enthusiasm for this process. And I know that amongst you there are also Western Balkan representatives. I've always hoped that these Western Balkan representatives will be more involved in this conference because you are part of Europe and your future is within the Union. And with this enthusiasm come great expectations for delivering results. And European citizens have already voiced their opinion and expectations on a vast number of policy areas: animal well-being, health, safety, security, and all of these matters will be discussed at the plenary session where national parliaments are present. And many of you have participated, and we are, for our part, ready to follow up that work and continue it, and to think about how our union serves citizens, because European democracy is a journey that we all take together. We can set the course for our future, a citizens' Europe, because Europe is all of us. And I wish you a very pleasant debate. Thank you. I think that the President of the Commission put it very well. We are Europe, and it is up to us to shape Europe. And sometimes our citizens aren't sufficiently aware of that. I'll now hand over to our main speakers for today. First, Guy Verhofstadt. Dear Guy, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say, it really is an honour here for me to take the floor here in the National Assembly. On TV, it looks much bigger, I have to say, than it is in reality. I've also noticed that you can't have a fear of heights when you come here to speak, especially if you're the President of the Assembly. But as I said, an honour for me to be here today in the French National Assembly, the home, the beating heart, I would say, of French democracy. Even if I may say that it was here that, unfortunately, in 1954, on the 30th of August, so 68 years ago, that we did not vote in favour of the European defence. And apologies to my French counterparts. I know that they are now strong proponents of that. But in 54, after the death of Stalin, after the end of the war in Korea, there was a desire for easy peace, peace without any effort coming from member states or politicians. We thought once the Korean War was over and Stalin dead, everything would go well. easily. And unfortunately, today we know that that is not the case. And personally, dear friends, on the 20th of February 2014, exactly 8 years ago, I was on Maidan Square in Kiev, the day where 49 Ukraine citizens were killed by Yanukovych, the so-called leader of the Ukrainian state. And on the 20th of February 2014, I saw in the eyes of all of the protesters on the Maidan Square their desire and their hope, their desire to be part of a democratic continent, to be part of Europe and the European Union. All of those people who were protesting at the Maidan Square, being shot at by Ukraine soldiers controlled by Yanukovych, were just wanted one thing: democracy and Europe. That was a matter of life and death for them. We must remember that today, because today we have seen an autocrat, a dictator, at our European Union borders, trying to kill, to extinguish that desire, that hope, using weapons which are not aimed at military installations, but weapons and bombs targeting hospitals, homes, schools, nuclear power plants. And so personally, I'm taking the opportunity of being here, Madam Chair, to plead for more European unity, more support for our friends in Ukraine. And once again, I'm taking advantage of being here to ask for stronger measures against the autocratic regime of Putin, stronger measures from the European Union. And I say this because, yes, we have to take swift sanctions, but excluding 70% of Russian banks, that's not strong enough. We need to have economic sanctions taken against Putin's regime, but yet we continue to take hundreds of millions of euros of gas every day. That's not enough. And if we want to help the Ukrainian people in their desire to be free, to be in a democracy, we have to do more. We have to take stronger action. We need to show solidarity. And yes, that might mean that we suffer ourselves too. And it is with that in mind that we now need to continue the work that we're doing on the Conference on the Future of Europe. I think seeing, given what is happening at our borders, we need to have a braver conference, take more action, and our conference should go beyond what we imagined it would be when we initially started it as an experiment. And I have to say, very honestly, as an MEP, as co-chair of this conference, I can't imagine in 2 months, on the 9th of May, that we could simply conclude our work by publishing a nice document which will be translated into 24 languages, as we so often do in the European Union. I think that on the 9th of May, we should finish our work with a strong political act. And personally, that, for me, would mean having a proper agreement refounding the European project based on proper conference conclusions. We cannot afford to have business as usual. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. We cannot afford to conclude this conference with nothing after it, with no follow-up. On the 9th of May, we should have an agreement, a convention with the European Union reuniting around the idea of being a true union. Let us be honest. We use the words European Union, but in reality, we are not really a union. It's still a form of cooperation, intergovernmental cooperation amongst member states based on unanimity, which does stand in the way of many of our policies at European level. And in 4 panel discussions, dear colleagues, our European citizens came up with 178 recommendations on the future of the European Union. And I think that it is our solemn duty. We have a mandate here to defend these 178 recommendations from our citizens. What do they want, our citizens? What are they asking for? Well, for example, they're asking for European joint armoured forces. They, amongst other things, are pushing for an end to the rule of unanimity, voting by unanimity, which hampers European decision-making, and they want a union of energy, a health union. And these citizens want to understand the European Union. They want the Commission to be a true executive. No one understands what we mean when we talk about the Commission to our citizens. They want true European democracy with a stronger role for national parliaments at a European policy level and transnational lists for elections at European level. They want improved migration policy with the strategies being decided at European level, and they also want a permanent mechanism for citizen participation in decision-making at European level.
Les citoyens.
So what the citizens are telling us in these 178 recommendations is that they want a Europe that counts on the global stage. Unlike what the journalists say, and unlike what politicians think, there aren't 2 categories of Europeans. You know, the Euro skeptics who criticise Europe, who want to put an end to Europe, and then the Europhiles who love Europe. Everybody who took part has a European dream, but at the same time they voice criticism at the European Union. They don't feel that the European Union as it stands is a true reflection of their wishes and dreams when it comes to the future of Europe. So they want us to create a Europe that defends the interests of its citizens on the global stage, a global stage which is more and more dominated by strong competition between the major powers. Europe is a giant if you look at it from the outside, but it's a giant that needs to be woken up as quickly as possible in these dramatic times. We need to do this now, before it's too late. And that is the purpose of the conference. We can't allow our weaknesses to continue, weaknesses in the migratory flows, in the financial crisis, in the health crisis and in the geopolitical crisis that we're living through at the moment. The time has come with the conference and the follow-up to the conference to take our destiny into our own hands. And that's why I'm calling on you as a representative of the European Parliament. And I have worked with Mr. Rapin and the President on this. That's why I'm calling on you. The European Parliament and national parliaments should continue to act as the driving force behind the conference with the support of our citizens. Thank you very much for all the support that you have offered to the Conference on the Future of Europe.
Merci, cher Guy Verhofstadt.
Thank you.
Pouvoir dire, vous pouvez compter en tout cas sur nous pour essayer en tout cas de réaliser au mieux les ambitions de la conférence. Et je donne sans tarder la parole à Madame la Commissaire Šuica.
Thank you, Madam Chair, dear members of parliaments, dear members of national parliaments and European Parliament, dear ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here in this House of French democracy. Given the circumstances under which we meet, I will first speak to you about my personal experience. One that led me to work hard to ensure that the generations to come would never have to experience it. Believe me, it is not easy to share this. I have seen firsthand what it means to live through a war. I know what it means to be frightened for the lives of your children and family, while also dependent on the help and interventions of friends and allies. I feel humble to have contributed as a politician on the local, national, and European level to Croatia joining and being part of this European Union family. The European Union is fully united against the illegal actions of the Kremlin, and we stand in solidarity behind our actions to stand up and speak out in the face of this unjust, unprovoked attack on Ukraine. As you have already heard from my friend Guy Verhofstadt and from President von der Leyen, the Conference on the Future of Europe is a celebration of our values. We need it more than ever. Through the conference, we have created a space for free debate and deliberation, in contrast to the repressive, violent events in Ukraine. While we are engaged in exercise that brings us closer to citizens, Putin is launching military action against Ukrainian citizens that had voiced European aspirations. This is why we see this as being also an attack on our values, our aspirations, and our way of life. At the final European Citizen Panel in Dublin last week, I saw citizens talking and taking the initiative to stand together in a sign of solidarity with Ukraine. Because this conference has an impact both inside and outside the Union. Because the events in Ukraine also speak to our collective future. It is vital that our European Union comes together hand in hand with our citizens to build our future on our common democratic values. We are stronger together. Therefore, I welcome very much the French presidency's support for the conference and the commitment from the Czech and Swedish presidencies to follow up the outcomes. The core idea of the conference is that the deliberations about the future of the European Union take place at all levels, across borders and across languages, across cultures and across histories, leaving no one and nowhere behind. European Union policy making is not simply top-down. My time as mayor of Dubrovnik taught me a valuable lesson. All politics is local. We must nurture the grassroots. Every generation can actively contribute to our democracy. This can help make our democratic institutions fit for the future and capable of responding to the needs of citizens, wherever they choose to live, wherever they choose to work. This is an essential foundation of the single market for all citizens, and citizens are at the heart of the conference process. Their input into the multilingual digital platform, the European Citizens Panels, and the plenary is the basis of our work. The Commission's priority is to ensure that citizens are heard and feel included as full partners in the deliberations. The 4 European Citizens Panels have now submitted, as Guy already said, 178 recommendations. The recommendations of the European and national citizens panels are the basis for discussion in plenary. This is where we bring citizens into the core of policy making. On a par or on an equal footing with elected politicians to discuss the future European Union they want to live and work in. And citizens are doing a fantastic job, but they do not work alone. I have been an elected representative at the local, national, and European level, so of course, I'm a firm believer in representative democracy. The conference does not replace representative democracy, it actually reinforces it. Parliaments are places for debate, for voting, for decision making. The conference, including the plenary, is a place for deliberation. This is an important distinction, which is enshrined in the joint declaration of the conference. I regularly meet with the national parliaments and committees for European affairs because we have a joint responsibility to make this conference a success for our democracy, for our citizens. I'm grateful that national parliaments, who have a crucial role in the conference through their presence in the executive board and the conference plenary, are contributing actively to the conference, and again, we are stronger together. One of the clear messages from citizens is that they want citizens' assemblies and more participatory tools to be integrated into European Union policy making. Just 3 weeks ago, I was in Maastricht at the European Citizens Panel on European Union in the World and Migration. Citizens addressed the autonomy of the Union and they looked at how to remedy the causes of migration and the common approach to asylum. In the current circumstances, their contributions are increasingly important. When it comes to democracy and institutional governance, there too, citizens put forward ambitious proposals. Some of them you heard from Guy Verhofstadt. As we were listening to those during this process, we were listening to those who were in favor or who are in favor of European Union project, and also to those who are skeptical. Some ideas and some proposals would involve treaty change. Others can be implemented with the current setup. All aim at making the bodies and institutions of the European Union more accountable, more transparent, and more responsive. We are at a decisive stage of the conference. The plenaries in March and April will refine the citizens' recommendations to come forward with final proposals. Indeed, I will join some of you at the conference plenary next weekend in Strasbourg to discuss the recommendations from 2 panels. The representatives of national panels will also present their findings at the plenary. The following plenaries in late March and 2 in April will develop the recommendations further and group them thematically into proposals, which will be adopted in the last plenary. The conclusions will shape the final report to the joint presidency on the 9th of March. Yes, Guy Verhofstadt said it won't be a report, this is not business as usual this time, it should be a strong political act, and I completely agree with you. You heard what President von der Leyen said a few minutes ago. We are determined to follow up. Some recommendations concern areas which are competence of member states, such as education and healthcare. An example is the recommendation of European Union-wide school education on democracy. Given the distribution of competencies, this is primarily a task of member states, with the European Union playing a supporting role. So your commitment, the commitment of national parliaments to this process is vital. I want to emphasize how important it is that citizens recognize their efforts and input in the proposals that will come out of the conference. At this phase of the conference, when conference comes to a close, the work does not stop. The European Commission has committed to follow up swiftly to the conference conclusions and is already carefully examining recommendations. Regarding reaching consensus on the recommendations, it is clear that each component, including the national parliaments, will decide autonomously the modalities to express their support for plenary proposals. As indicated in our rules of procedure, the consensus of at least the 4 institutional components is needed for a proposal. But consensus among us is not enough. Citizens need to be able to fully subscribe to the plenary proposals, and this is why I support a very visible and clear validation by the ambassadors from European and citizens' panels. The success of the conference will be measured on the concrete results that we can deliver for citizens. You have a central role to play in it. Some recommendations point to an information gap in our democracy and call directly for more information about the European Union. Other recommendations, unfortunately, reveal a lack of awareness of measures that the European Union is already taking or has taken. As we move to the phase of shaping these recommendations into proposals, we see huge scope and need for cooperation between us and national parliaments, European institutions, to reduce this information gap and follow up on the proposals that will be adopted. We can build on the existing collaboration where some 6,000 events have been organized as part of the conference. This shows that national parliamentarians have mobilized their networks and reached out to their constituencies. And to conclude, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in my own reflection on the future of our democracy, I would hope that historians may look at European democracy from a pre- and post-conference perspective. And I'm confident that our precious representative democracy will come out strengthened. The European Union was able to build the basis for the next generation of Europeans to have the same peace and prosperity that those of my generation aspired to and finally achieved. Current events in Ukraine remind me of this. We can never take democracy for granted. We have to work on it together every day at all levels. We need the rich contribution and participation of 1.1 million elected representatives at the local level. The Conference on the Future of Europe is a unique historic opportunity. We must grab it firmly with both hands and together shape the European Union that our citizens want now and for generations to come. We must get it right if we want to build a democracy that is worthy of the name and fit for the future. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Vice President. You made a very important point, which I'd like to highlight. All politics are local. And that's the level at which we should be acting. We should have stronger ties between the local level, the national level, and the European level, and in both directions. We don't do that enough. And that's something that we should do as national parliaments. We need to discuss these matters, pass on the message to our citizens at local level, so that they can see the impact of European decisions at all levels. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to the speakers. We've got lots of people on the list. 27 requests for the floor. So thank you, as usual, for making very brief comments. 1 minute, 1.5 minutes max. I'd like to start with representatives of the Troika, and then we'll move on to other colleagues. Constance Le Gris, National Assembly.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, Presidents, colleagues. The work on the Conference of Europe is coming to a conclusion. The war raged by Vladimir Putin against the people of Ukraine has suddenly entered into our debate and changed the nature of the debate. Business as usual is no longer possible. It's the first time I've spoken at this COSAC, so I would like to strongly condemn the war launched by President Putin against the Ukraine, a free country with a strong European destiny. Ukraine's future is with us, and I'd like to express my solidarity and the solidarity of my political group to the people of Ukraine. And we need to show this in concrete terms, humanitarian aid, military aid and support. And I think we need to be courageous enough to go further in terms of sanctions against the Kremlin and the oligarchs. I fully support the idea that our priorities have changed in the Conference of Europe. The war in Ukraine and the heroic resistance of the people of Ukraine has provoked what we've seen before in other recent wars, what we haven't seen in previous wars, rather. This time we have a real incentive to take a step forward towards energy independence, etc. These are priorities now. Let's not miss the opportunity offered by the Conference of Europe.
Pour l'Assemblée nationale slovène.
Slovenia, please.
Il semble ne pas être là. Donc, David Smoljak pour la République tchèque.
Czech Republic, the Czech Senate.
Děkuji za slovo, paní předsedkyně.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen. When I was still on the plane, I was reading the conclusions of the citizens' panels, and I was very pleasantly surprised how very well structured these proposals were, how deep the insight was. But let us be honest. The future of Europe is not about a conference. The future of Europe is now being decided in Kiev, in Kharkov, and in other places in Ukraine that are under attack by an unprovoked Russian aggression. As Mr. Verhofstadt just said, it didn't start now. It didn't start by this attack on Ukraine. The fight for freedom and for democratic values started 9 years ago in Maidan. There were enormous casualties, but people fought for their way towards the West. And I think that there's no other nation in Europe that would fight a bigger fight for their future than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are dying now for these ideals. And I'm convinced that we mustn't disappoint them. The future of Europe is in our hands, and in these days we are deciding about it. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Peter Kmek, National Council, Slovakia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a couple of months left before we wrap up our discussions on the future of Europe. We'll have a unique collection of ideas from our citizens, and it will be our duty to implement as many of them as possible. On one hand, we'll have to improve our union so that it becomes more citizen-friendly. On the other hand, we'll have to strengthen our union so that it becomes more resilient to global challenges. The war in Ukraine is exactly the global challenge for the EU that needs to be handled right now. The future of Europe is being written now. We should strengthen our decision-making process in foreign and security agenda by introducing a qualified majority voting. We should continue helping Ukraine to defend herself and stand behind the French EU presidency. We should give President Macron a strong mandate to negotiate with Russia in order to stop this senseless war. Putin should feel every minute that the European Union is united and stands fully behind Ukraine. The credibility of the European Union is being tested now, and we have to do our utmost to live up to expectations of all the Ukrainians. Their European perspective should be guaranteed, and the candidate status for Ukraine should be granted as soon as possible. That also applies to Georgia and Moldova. Finishing the enlargement in the Western Balkans should be a top priority too. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, colleagues. The Belgian Chamber of Representatives, please.
Elle semble pas être là. Alors,
Apparently she's not here. Gunther Krichbaum from the Bundestag.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President Sabine.
Reply especially to your proposals. But first of all, I want to thank you because you was not only the advocate of the parliaments, you was the advocate of the national parliaments, especially when we negotiated in the executive board, their remarkable proposals from your side could be achieved. And so thank you very much once again. But I want also to pick up one proposal you made to go further in the sanctions to Russia. Guy, let's reflect about the idea to confiscate the Russian foreign reserves of the currency and to confiscate the foreign reserve assets, because sure, finally it cannot offset the human suffering, but it can offset the damages Russia made in Ukraine, and therefore they have to pay. They have to pay for it. And so let's check, dear colleagues, the possibility, legal possibilities that they can and they have finally to pay with their money for the damages they caused in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you. Reinhard Lopatka, the Austrian National Council.
Dear Vice President Sucha, dear Guy Verhofstadt, dear colleagues, first of all, I want to say I fully agree with my German colleague Gunther Krichbaum. But we should also come back to our homework. And the conference, The Future of Europe, is our homework. And with a view to the outcome, to the draft balance conclusions, in which all positions and ideas should be sufficiently recognized, I have three concrete proposals. First, we need balanced conclusions. Secondly, the follow-up to the conclusions must be guaranteed. I cannot see it now in a clear way. And thirdly, the discourse with the citizens, and especially with the young people, must not come to an end. In this context, I welcome the proposals on the introduction of a permanent EU mechanism for citizens' participation. And in addition, the role of national parliaments in the EU must be given greater recognition. What I see currently is the opposite development. The influence of national parliaments has decreased year by year. In this context, I welcome the establishment of COSAC working groups. I'm thinking in particular, we have to strengthen and revitalize the principle of subsidiarity. Here we lost it in many cases, especially speaking of these delegate acts where we have no influence at all, and they decreased. Last sentence, we need a green card for national parliaments to have a stronger Europe. We need the involvement also of national parliaments. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Luís Capola Santos from the Portuguese Parliament. Dear Sabine, Jean-François, Guy, Dubrovka, in a very short period of time and in the difficult period of the pandemic, and with your inestimable support, the Conference on the Future of Europe made much faster progress than we expected when we launched the process back under the Portuguese presidency. The citizens' panels were very innovative, as were the working groups, and these were positive experiences. In Portugal, we have a positive assessment of the initiatives that we've carried out in the country, together with the European Parliament, the Commission, and civil society. A lot of young people participated as well. We now have to take the final step we're moving into the home straight, and that means that we need to put the proposals approved into practice. At the moment, we're witnessing terrible events, and these must be an additional incentive to become more ambitious and work towards a more cohesive Europe, stronger internally and externally. And Guy Verhofstadt made this point very clearly. Following recent elections, the Portuguese Parliament will go back to business as usual at the beginning of April, and we remain committed to the successful outcome of this conference. It's extremely important for the future of Europe. Thank you.
Merci, cher Luis.
Thank you, Luis. Sergio Battelli from the Italian Parliament. Thank you, President. The conference on the future of Europe is reaching a decisive stage. I'd like to thank Guy Verhofstadt for what he said. I support what he said. The plenary now has to take forward the work done in the panels and the proposals from the citizens. I think the members of the panel have and the plenary have a key role to play in discussions on the recommendations in the plenary. I would like to acknowledge the understanding between the European Parliament and national parliaments. I think it's important that both groups of parliaments play an important part. We need to work on relaunching the European project. We need to be ambitious. We need to create a Europe that has its rightful place on the world stage. And we need to have strategic autonomy. We need to develop instruments that make Europe more coherent and more stable, in particular in relation to foreign policy. And we need to work towards peace and stability in Europe and in surrounding regions. We need to make Europe independent in energy terms, industrial terms, and in terms of food supply. Thank you, President. Thank you. The Croatian Parliament, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, parliamentarians, Madam Vice President of the Commission, we need to continue to believe in a future that is based on a concept of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. We cannot accept the logic of competing spheres of interest, like this concept that there is such a thing as a Russian world. What is the result of that? We see it today. The result is war. I come from Croatia. We have experienced the horrors of war. And for that, I say that it's really troubling to see that there are still attempts in our neighborhood to imitate this concept of spheres of influence. This is very dangerous, dear colleagues. No country in the Western Balkans should be thinking along these lines. All the countries in the Western Balkans should align themselves with the European Union, with the defense of freedom and democracy, without hesitation. There is no more room for a position of non-alignment, not anymore. Based on such a strategic alignment, of course, the doors of the European Union should be fully open to the integration of the Western Balkans. Because, dear colleagues, this continues to be an essential part to build a future of a Europe that will really be whole, that will be free, that will be at peace. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, dear colleague. Jessica Roswald now for Sweden.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, the purpose with the conference was to engage more European citizens in the discussion all over our continent and how the European Union best can meet their demands for common action to solve common problems. This is very good and have been in one way successful. But in another way, I fear we run the risk of an embarrassing failure. We now see suggestions that the many recommendations from the panels are to be taken back to the working groups for new discussions, and then we put forward as new proposals to the plenary again. Excuse me, but this is not what we need, and this is not the decision-making that we have agreed on. What the conference now should need is to focus on the final report. It should give an unbiased account of all activities within the conference, and it should present the recommendations from the panels in an objective manner, and that's enough. Then, after the 9th of May, we can start to work on what we can do with all the ideas from the conference within our respective institutions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I will now hand over to the Netherlands Chamber of Representatives, please.
Thank you, Madam la Présidente. The current events have made it evident that we need a strong European Union that is able to act swiftly and united, especially in times of crisis. And I am proud of the way we have come together in supporting Ukraine and condemning the act of war of Russia. And I think we all recognize that we have to work together if we want to build an even stronger and more independent European Union. To shape the future, it is essential that we take into account the voice of the people, because they are the hearts and souls of Europe. We have had interesting debates yesterday and today on the future of Europe and important topics. But one topic that we have not addressed is that we have to bring the European Union closer to its citizens. As politicians, we then tend to focus on more power or influence for national parliaments or the European Parliament or solutions like transnational lists or Spitzenkandidaten. But we must not forget that the most important thing is that we show concrete results and be transparent on what is happening in Brussels and why. We as members of national parliaments have an important role to play in this. We have to keep explaining what the added value of the European Union is and push for more transparency in the decision-making process, because that will strengthen the credibility of the European Union and makes it easier for citizens, but also national parliaments, to understand what is happening in Brussels. And lastly, I have a question about the organization of the conference. I have some concern about the timeline, especially with the current events. We have 3 plenary sessions in only 5 weeks. This was already a challenge without the crisis in Ukraine, but it's even more challenge now, let alone that we can have the effects and the insights that the effects and the insight could be relevant for how we build the future. Could the organization comment on this? Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Now, the Spanish representative.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, President.
COSAC. Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to take part in COSAC. I started speaking Catalan, which is the official language of many millions of Europeans, and I hope it will soon become an official language. The conference was a good initiative, but I think there is room for improvement. I mean, who is exactly taking part? Who's participating? A lot of people are involved, but they're mainly experts. What about the citizens and young people who don't know what the European Union is? I think citizens at large don't really know what this is. There is this huge gap, this disconnect between the European Union and our citizens. We've said that national parliaments should be the driving force. Well, what about regional parliaments? What about cross-border regions? In Catalonia, for example, we need to take account the interests of our citizens. And there are certain specificities which have to be taken into account in our region. The convention proposed, well, I hope that we'll be able to take this forward. We don't want to just lock this up in a drawer, because that would increase disaffection. This is an opportunity to listen directly to our citizens, and we need to make the most of this opportunity to show, that Europe is indeed its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the Romanian Senate.
Thank you, Sabine. Dear colleagues, we welcome the ambitious approach and appreciate the efforts made by the French presidency in the first 2 months of its mandate to register progress on the European agenda. Building a new European project, as the Conference on the Future of Europe is intended to be, Romania relies on pragmatic conclusions and emphasizes that it is important that they prioritize how EU policies produce concrete results for citizens and more little institutional debate. We welcome and support the achievement of the French presidency's goal of protecting the EU's external borders. At the same time, in the wake of the pandemic and the crisis in Ukraine, it is important to ensure a fully integrated Schengen area that contributes not only to an efficient and functional single market, but also for the stability of Europe. We welcome and recall the recent positions of the European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ms. Ylva Johansson, according to which Romania is ready to become a full member of the Schengen area. The statement made in the context of the visit to Romania amid the refugee crisis in Ukraine. Thus, we reiterate and highlight Romania's engagement and legitimate goal of joining the Schengen area, given that Romania has already met the accession Ukraine. Finally, we know that in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has also been overshadowed by the crisis in Ukraine, the emergence of the idea of reorganizing the European decision-making system, the need to find the best solutions to improve EU decision-making mechanisms, and strengthening resilience at both the institutional and citizen level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. I will now give the floor to the representative of the French Parliament. Thank you. Yes, it is clear, in light of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that European citizens are expecting a great deal of the European Union, and we need to work in a more efficient, decisive way in the field of defence and security. Strategic autonomy is absolutely vital in this context, and we need to make sure that we have provisions for mutual support when member states are being threatened by third countries. We cannot simply restrict our policies to financial and economic cooperation. We need to be able to defend, and we need the budget for that. When it comes to energy, we must become independent. That has been made very clear over the past few days. And that is what our European citizens need. They need energy, they need help, they need our support so that we can face the consequences of these tragic events. On migration, the principle of solidarity is what is really at stake here. A fair distribution of the burden is something that should be at the heart of the new Migration Pact for Europe. Those are the four great steps that we must take, that our European citizens are expecting us to take. We must take these steps forward, make progress. Only by doing that we'll be able to show that Europe is strong. Thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to the representative of the Lithuanian Parliament. He appears not to be present. I will now give the floor to the representative of the National Assembly for Bulgaria. No, in that case, Latvian representative.
Sorry, I'm Christian Vigenin. You catch me unprepared.
Okay, excuse me.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues. Sorry? Bulgaria, yes, it's Bulgaria. We were missing for 1 year, so maybe we're not on your list. Yes. Well, I'd like to use the opportunity to thank you personally and the French colleagues for the excellent organization of this event, both in terms of technical organization, but also speakers and selection of topics. I'm happy that Bulgaria, after a year of political instability and 3 parliamentary elections, has now a functioning parliament, and we can now return fully to the work of COSAC. It is difficult to catch up, but now we'll try to intensify our work on the Future of Europe conference in its final stage, with a number of public events in the National Assembly that are under planning. We expect that the conference would foresee a follow-up mechanism to review on a regular basis the implementation of its conclusions and recommendations. Otherwise, it will remain just an exercise without concrete mechanism to implement what has been achieved. For us, for Bulgaria, main priorities in these discussions are growth and competitiveness of European economy, digital and climate transformation, public health, migration, enlargement, and rule of law. The war in Ukraine will definitely change the focus of the conference. We see how important it is to come up with feasible policies and strategies in 3 areas: resilience and autonomy of the EU economy, energy independence, security and defense cooperation on drastically elevated level. Finally, we are Europe, said Madame von der Leyen, rightly so, but there is another Europe on our east, which is under military invasion. We believe that in addition to all other measures that have been taken so far, EU can make a strong signal by giving a candidate country status to Ukraine, as well as Moldova and Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, the representative for the Latvian Parliament.
Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, leaders of the conference. I'm going to address COSAC, but also Mr. Verhofstadt, who is the key personality at the conference on the future of Europe. I see the problem. The Council, the Parliament, and the Commission cannot quickly find a common attitude towards proposals of the European citizens. Clearly, the process is very painful. The point of view of the European Council will be central, since politically based national leaders are represented there who could have quite different views on how to develop the European Union. If the proposals are supported, it is them who will have to solve the economic and social challenges in the way they do not want to act at all. There should be the opportunities for the European Union citizens to have their wishes carried out, as it had been promised at the very beginning of the conference. Doing things differently would mean not merely mislead European citizens, it would mean lie to them. It is difficult to imagine the more hypocritical end of the conference on the future of Europe. It is little to admit that the work on strengthening Europe's future and Europe needs to be continued. It is necessary to emphasize that the conference needs to continue its work after the 9th of May. Thank you so much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the representative for Cyprus.
Αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι.
Thank you. The migratory flows have not stopped and will not stop while foreign wars, poverty, and other root causes of migration persist. And our policies, climate change, conflicts are forcing people to seek refuge in Europe. I come from Cyprus, where the territorial rights have been being tested since for many years now, and we wish to say at this stage that we welcome the fact that European leaders have granted protection to Ukrainian citizens, but how willing the EU is to welcome refugees from the Ukraine is not the same as those coming from the Middle East. All those fleeing conflicts should be given the same protection. That is a fundamental principle for us. And we see there being a difference of treatment here in Europe. And so, dear colleagues, we must get rid of the Dublin regulation, which forces refugees to stay in the first country of arrival. We need to find new agreements with partner countries like Turkey. The migration situation demands that we reform our European migration policy. We need a viable, sustainable, fair system based on the respect of international law and upholding solidarity amongst member states. Member states need to be able to face these challenges, and in order to do that, we need to have a relocation mechanism based on solidarity. Thank you.
Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, ich möchte.
Thank you. I would like to support Guy Verhofstadt's proposal. I think that we have a wind of opportunity here, and we need to give a clear follow-up to the outcome of the conference, and we need to meet the high expectations coming from our European citizens who are demanding a European Union that can take effective action in light of the Ukrainian conflict. And on the 9th of May, we need to have an outcome which makes the European Union more efficient and democratic. And we need to have better projects for common security and defence policy, where we can act more together. We need 3 pillars for this. One, with the proposals coming from the conference, which can already be implemented. 60% of those can be implemented. We need to implement all of them. There are some that can be implemented straight away. We must process them in our European institutions. And we need certain measures that require a new form of agreement. No one in this room will agree that we can become more efficient simply by having speeches. We need a new form of agreement. We need to prepare that, and we represent the European citizens. We legislate. We are the parliamentary representatives of our citizens. We need to listen to their proposals and implement them as parliamentarians. Thank you very much, Vice President. Now, the representative for the Estonian Parliament.
Austatud saadikud, me elame üle.
Dear people, we are currently living through the most dramatic moments after World War II, the tanks in the middle of Europe. This aggression, violent aggression, means that Europe has to do everything in order to save the Ukrainians who are fighting for their life. This is our task number 1. But the paradox is that in order to prevent the tanks of Russia, thousands of people go on the streets and they speak in Russian and they send back the army in the Russian language. And the pictures are as in Tallinn in 1991, when we had Molotov cocktails and we were fighting against the Russian tanks, but we didn't need them, miraculously. But we can see that European nations are have solidarity with Ukraine, also Switzerland and Norway, who are not in the EU. And we have to have more federation. We don't have to go along with this and give more power to the European Commission. We have to make maximum sanctions, and we can do this for Ukraine immediately and now. Estonia doesn't support the changes in the treaties. We all remember Brexit. We could not prevent it. And only if we respect the rights of the member states and the actual subsidiarity, this can prevent other Brexits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative for the Irish Parliament, please.
Madam President, once more the horrors of war have been visited on Europe. The EU stands steadfast for Ukraine's right to sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are discussing the future of Europe. This process has been given a new impetus due to the terrible events. Let this crisis be a catalyst for change. All member states have agreed a comprehensive set of sanctions and to help with the refugee crisis. Each member state brings its unique history and tradition to this issue. We must finalize the strategic compass and develop the European Peace Facility through the provision of a suite of military supports. The EU has faced many challenges: the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, COVID-19, climate change, migration, energy and food provision. Ukraine is now our greatest challenge. Let us speed up the enlargement process, including the admission of the Western Balkans and indeed Ukraine. Let us stand in solidarity together, strong and united. And in this context, let us implement the Conference on the Future of Europe without delay so that we can meet these challenges head on. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, dear colleague. Now, the representative for the European Parliament.
Presidenta.
Thank you, President. The conference is also there to review and revise what we've done in recent years. I know that's not a priority. I'm rapporteur on subsidiarity in the European Parliament. I have experience in both national and regional parliaments, and I wanted to ask you a question. How long do we need to realise that the early warning system hasn't worked? I mean, we've had a number of cases, many thousands of cases, but we've had no orange cards, no amber cards, and none of them have been shown. So that shows that internal checks don't necessarily work. And yet this, so it shows that internal controls do work, and yet this early warning system seems to monopolise our attention and doesn't give enough time to political dialogue. So we need to find a format to focus on political dialogue. I think we should abandon this procedure and focus on subsidiarity and have a meeting that will allow us to discuss this matter in more detail.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, the Italian Senate representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What started as a domestical, political crisis in Ukraine has escalated.
Alguse sai poliitilisest kriisist, aga nüüd sai sellest sõjaline kriis, mis ohustab kogu Euroopat ja kogu maailma. Aga see kriis
Not just about Ukraine. The crisis is not just about Europe. It has enormous global implication. Today, the conflict in Ukraine appears to send the terrible message that policies of aggression and annexation can turn up to be successful even in today's world. And it is especially dangerous for Asia. Now, the central objective and first priority of our strategy should not be to punish Russia, but to strengthen those countries that are in the area between the European Union and the Russian Federation, such as Moldova and Georgia, must be able to freely choose their future. So, I ask you, dear colleagues, when, if not now, is the right time to take concrete steps toward European defense integration? We know that not everybody shares the vision of a European army, but we need a serious debate about it. The establishment of a European army under full parliamentary control must remain a goal for all of us, for the future of Europe, for the sake of our freedom. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Helmut Brandstätter, Austrian National Council now.
Kollege, Europa ist oft der Vorwurf gemacht worden.
Europe is often accused of being too elitist, but Guy Verhofstadt has said very clearly what our citizens want, and it's clear that they want more common defence and security, and I can feel that this could be a moment for Europe to be more united, but at the same time we have seen nationalists trying to turn people against each other. And we would like to say that we should work together more. I was fortunate enough to do a work experience placement at the EU before my country was a member. And we believed that we could build a better Europe. That made me a passionate European, and I believe now is a crucial turning point to help Ukrainian citizens. In the future, we need to work on our institutions, and we also need to do that on behalf of the Western Balkan countries. Young people have made their requests clear, and we need to say to leaders, if you are a nationalist, you cannot be part of Europe. If you share our values, then we look forward to them being part of Europe. Thank you. Now the German Bundestag representative.
Frau Vorsitzende, liebe
Thank you, President, dear colleagues. On the 22nd of February, the world changed. We now have war in Europe. Now we as the European Union need to do everything that we can in order to improve how we work, take swifter, more unified action, and take every opportunity to work together better. I believe the Conference on the Future of Europe is such an opportunity. Our citizens have now tried to come together to come up with tangible ideas on how the future of Europe will look. And after this conference, we have to immediately implement those recommendations. Some may even result in a new form of agreement, a convention. But our citizens need to see the results. They have shown that they want to participate in shaping the future of Europe, a Europe that has space for those from the Ukraine, from the Western Balkans, from other countries. And we need to take these steps together in our parliaments with our citizens. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to the representative from the Greek Parliament. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, the success of the Conference on the Future of Europe depends on whether the panel recommendations put forward by citizens really can be implemented to create a Europe which is more united, which is a meritocracy. And the French presidency project for a stronger Europe under their motto is what we need at this time. I listened to the debates on nationalist governments and what was said on the forces that are acting against Europe that would, in fact, want to ignore the outcome on the Conference of the Future of Europe. I think that we have reached a stage where we cannot hesitate. We cannot ignore the will of the people, not only because that there are high expectations weighing upon us, but for the sake of democracy. It would be suicidal. We are experiencing a period of conflict, of instability, and we need a more democratic, united Europe to face these challenges in order to defend peace, stability, and democracy across our continent, in the world, indeed, without the risk of external threats. Thank you. Thank you. I now hand over to the representative for Croatia.
Thank you, Madam President, dear colleagues. When we talk about the future of Europe, I cannot stop, and I have to say that the European project for me is not finished, and it is not finished without the Western Balkans, without the Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, but also without Ukraine, Georgia, and all those countries that want to share our family. And this is why when we talk about the future of Europe, this has to be emphasized. Europe will not be complete until all of us who share these values, all of us who represent democracy, and freedom until we are all not part of this family. And I would like to send out this message from this respected seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Uni Vatska, the Finnish Parliament, please.
Puheenjohtaja, Madam Chair. Kaikki esitykset ja aloitteet, joita
President, the work under the conference on the future in Europe is extremely important. We have recommendations from our citizens. Some recommendations are shorter than others. Some want cross-border lists. Others want a European army. We haven't had enough time to go through all these proposals, and that's why we need a conference, a congress, to allow us to go through in all these recommendations in detail. The European Union has responded in a strong and united way to Russia's aggression in Ukraine. If we want to build a new Europe, we have to adopt a similar approach. I support President Macron and his strong line. The most important thing now is to ensure that our citizens are secure. The Croatian Parliament, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed colleagues. We don't have a lot of time to deliver our message here, so I will keep mine brief and to the point. Take a good, hard look at the Western Balkans, ladies and gentlemen, because you can be certain that right now, the Western Balkans are looking very hard at us. We made promises to these countries. We said, if you do some reforms, if you do the work, you will receive an honest reward for that. And in the Balkans, the word is the measure of a man. If you go back on your word, you lose the trust. And unfortunately, we have gone back on our word. And in this situation, when we are talking about a fast track for Ukraine, the Western Balkan countries are looking at us and thinking, well, what about us? So it is somewhat cynical, and I apologize for being blunt, that we are talking about Ukrainian identity, and yet not every EU member state recognizes Kosovo. We are talking about Ukrainian identity, and Macedonian identity has been challenged for the better part of the past 30 years, ever since the gaining of independence. So let's not go back on our word in the Western Balkans, ladies and gentlemen, otherwise we will be to blame if we lose them. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. The Estonian Parliament, please.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. The past hits us in the future, said the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. The future of Europe will depend on our readiness to learn from the mistakes we have made in the past. I am going to point at three major mistakes which have brought us in the situation where not only a sovereign, peaceful nation, Ukraine, is under attack, but also the liberal, rules-based international order. Firstly, there has been a certain naivety among some Western politicians and intellectuals that the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union meant also rebirth of Russia and turn to democracy. Secondly, it has been difficult for some countries to comprehend that trade and economic relations could, under some conditions, become instruments of aggressive foreign policy. Thirdly, the refusal to acknowledge that the crimes of communism were not fundamentally different from the crimes of Nazism. Under the seemingly universal message of communism was Soviet Russia's militaristic, chauvinistic nationalism. Although the massive physical repressions in the Soviet Union more or less came to an end with the death of Stalin, the ideological terror continued for the subsequent half-century in all communist countries. Putin's Russia is continuing the same agenda by attacking Georgia in 2008 and by invading Crimea in 2014. There are several political and historical reasons why the Soviet and the Nazi terror have been treated differently. First, the Soviet Union's status as an ally of the United States and Western Europe in the Second World War rendered it inappropriate to critique its realpolitik. Second, a trial comparable to the Nuremberg trials, which clarified the responsibility for Nazi crimes, has never been held for the crimes of communism. Third, access to archives located in Russia has been difficult for researchers. Fourth, the collapse of the Soviet Empire worried many of the large nations of Western Europe. This imposed the burden of writing a new narrative of the past. There is a pressing need to inscribe the history of communist crimes in East Europe as part of European history. I conclude, this is necessary not only for the sake of the East Europeans, but for all Europe, since without this, unification of Europe is nothing but a formality. Thank you very much.
Chers collègues, nous avons encore...
We have 6 more speakers, colleagues. I'd also like to hear some concluding remarks from our speakers. So I suggest we have a shorter coffee break, if you agree. Okay. A Cypriot colleague. Colleagues, the Russian invasion of Ukraine means an end to our illusions. Europe finds itself between the eagle and the bear. And you can't tackle the bear through words alone. You know, we need to do what we can, but we can't keep on ignoring what's happening, closing our eyes to what's happening. We can't keep on waiting for support from across the Atlantic. If that's the case, we'll just keep on be lagging behind in the fight against oppression. In 1974, in Cyprus, we have experienced the drama that Ukraine is experiencing today. In our country, we are experiencing those very same difficulties. It's the same narrative that we're hearing from Turkey as we're hearing from Russia, and I'm very unhappy about these double standards that we're seeing at the moment. You know, maybe tomorrow it'll be Europe as a whole that will be the victims. We need to rewrite history and shape it.
Du Danemark.
Denmark.
Thank you. First, I will say that all our thoughts are going to the Ukrainian people from the Danish delegation. Although this is another topic. Dear colleagues, as national parliamentarians, we represent our citizens. We are in politics to change things for the better at a national level and at an EU level. The earlier we engage in decision-making, the better opportunity we have to influence the final decision. If we limit our work to scrutinizing EU proposals shortly before they are adopted, and now I will quote the Danish Commissioner, Vice President Margrethe Vestager, your time might be better spent going to have a drink. The best way to influence new laws is to speak out and contribute before proposals are presented. This is true in national politics as in European politics. We, the national parliaments, should be actively involved already at the consultation stage of European decision-making. That is why the Commission should consult national parliaments directly before presenting any significant proposals. The Commission should also include a summary of contributions from national parliaments in the introduction remarks to these legislative proposals. That would make the Council and the European Parliament aware of important concerns raised by national parliaments during consultations and make sure that we do not waste our time. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to 4 observer countries very briefly. Georgia first.
Merci, Madame. This is absolutely high time to discuss future of Europe, as Russia's unjustified brutal aggression in Ukraine gives another strong ground to rethink European future. In recent years, we are facing increasing pressure from Russia in EU's eastern neighborhood. We were seeing and experiencing firsthand how its behavior directly was impacting European security and European idea. From my own country's experience, I can tell you that beside the challenges we face, Georgia has clearly demonstrated its strong commitment to democracy and strong will to be part of the European Union. The EU is the place where our citizens believe they belong to, based on the history of our nation and based on the values that we share with the European Union. Nevertheless, we were always trying to adjust our ambitions to what EU was ready for. We tried to understand EU's enlargement fatigue or geopolitical sensitivities, but it is now more important than ever before to think together and to develop a long-term vision for the future of Europe. Europe which unites all European democracies wishing to be part of it. Europe that can ensure peace, security and prosperity of its citizens. Europe that we believe in and we apply for to become an integral part together with our Moldovan and Ukrainian friends. And I thank for supporting words which I hear today here. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Albania, please.
It has been 30 years since the fall of communism in my country, but still we are stuck in the path toward European Union. Other countries, my region, Balkans, are having a slow progress. The Balkans today seems like a gray space, empty space toward the European Union without being part of it. But my friends, no space is left empty forever. The more we stumble on the path toward the European Union, the more other anti-European influences grow in the Balkans. There are many. First of all, Kremlin influences are there in an attempt to fill this space, increasing skepticism in European perspective, supporting authoritarian leaders, and more dangerously, using ethnic, religious, and political conflict to trouble the region, and through trouble, strengthening influence as trouble fixer. Kosovo and Bosnia are clear examples of this situation. If Ukraine today is the first front line of Europe for freedom and democracy, make no mistake, the second one could be Balkan. Therefore, I think that the time has come that the process of integration of our countries in European Union, in NATO, of course, like in case of Kosovo, should no longer be treated as a bureaucratic issue, but as a clear political stand. The bureaucratic slowness and standards must be subordinated to the strategic need for full membership of the entire region in the European Union. Any hesitation will motivate Kremlin puppets in the region. Today, you and I are facing a security challenge. It's time to act. Any delay is no longer harmful. it could be dangerous. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et,
Thank you. We have the last two speakers, Montenegro.
Thank you, President. First of all, the allegation of the participants from the Greek Cypriot administration don't even deserve to be taken seriously. Distinguished delegation, of course, we reject the invasion of Russia on Ukraine and we express solidarity to Ukraine. The main issues in the future discussion on the conference had climate change, energy, economic crisis, democracy, migration, of course, security. These challenges we all face are common, massive, and hard. These all have profound effects on our common future and next generations. Turkey sees the conference as a unique and of course, timely opportunity to debate these challenges with citizens. However, as Turkey, we regret that, dear delegations, the European Union did not include citizens of the official and potential candidate countries in the debates on the conference Future of Europe. We would like to underline that all candidate countries which are part of the Future of Europe, we are not given the opportunity to attend this conference. Dear colleagues, within candidate countries, Turkey is the main important asset for the European Union on key issues, challenges that European Union, our region face today. We believe that European Union, our region, our all citizens should be more prosperous, more stable, more secure with Turkey's full membership. We also strongly believe that European future project objective will not complete until Turkey is a part of the European Union. That's why we need more collaboration, more encouragement, support fairly during French presidency term. We wish success term to French presidency. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. And finally, Montenegro.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. The slogan of the French presidency, recovery, strength, and a sense of belonging, is poignant and meaningful today, perhaps more than ever. The world is changing before our very eyes. The cards of political power are being redealt. And while the major superpowers are keeping strong focus on what are their interests, Europe must find its strength in the common sense of belonging of each and every nation in the European community. One such initiative is the Open Balkans initiative, which is of great importance for economic cooperation, strengthening institutional capacities, and creating new jobs in the region, as well as promoting the processes of integration. For the purpose of recovery and preservation of what are eminently European values and interests, the EU should seriously reconsider its enlargement policies. I call on the countries of the European Union to seriously affirm the European strategic sovereignty measures and interests. As Madam von der Leyen and many of my other esteemed colleagues have previously said, inclusion and not exclusion is the way forward and the way to recovery. Thank you very much. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor now to our speakers for some concluding remarks.
President, I think and want to thank you in the name of the whole conference and the co-chairs for this unanimous support, not only of the conference but also of the need that this conference concludes with bold, constructive proposals and reforms for the Union in the light of what is happening, the tragedy happening in and around Ukraine. And I want to tell you very openly that the co-chairs were from the beginning of the opinion that also the Western Balkans need to be involved in this process. And I'm also of the opinion that we need to solve the question of the entry of the Western Balkans. It's always better to have the Western Balkans around the table in Brussels than to put soldiers on the ground in Kosovo or in Bosnia-Herzegovina, as is still the case in Europe today. And certainly there is an opportunity to do that now. Secondly, there can be no misunderstanding, and I say that to our Swedish colleague. The purpose of the conference is not simply to hear what citizens have to say and then to say thank you very much and we do nothing. We reform nothing. Therefore, we have the Eurobarometer. It's not necessary to have a conference. The reason of the conference is to have a participation of the citizens in a decision-making process, to go over the hurdles and the obstacles we have seen the last decades in the building of a European Union. Let's be honest, it's not the first time that we are talking about European defense and European army and joint armed forces for the European Union. It's not the first time that we are talking about the end of unanimity in foreign policy. It's not the first time that we are talking about the necessity to involve national parliaments in a more, I should say, positive way, by green card, for example, and not only in a negative way, as is the case with the subsidiarity check today. It's not the first time, but it didn't happen the last years and the last decades. And what we want with the Conference of the Future of Europe is, by giving the floor, giving the possibility to the citizens to express themselves, to show to all the institutions, including those who have difficulties, to understand that the will of the people, the will of the European citizens, is to have an effective European Union, not a union that always is acting too little too late, but a union that is capable to defend the interests of the citizens in the world order of tomorrow. That is the purpose of the conference. It's not a listening exercise alone. It's a decision exercise for the future of the European Union. And I wanted to tell you that because, and that's my third point, to achieve this, we need a cooperation between national parliaments and European Parliament. I think that we can say that we did that from the beginning, starting by asking and requesting that there will be 108 delegates of the national parliaments in the conference. But it cannot be the end. What we are trying with Mr. Rapin and Mr. Tillet to do in the coming days is to conclude national parliaments and European Parliament together on the 24th of March on a common document that will be introduced by the two national parliaments and European Parliament in the conference on a number of issues on the recommendations of citizens. For example, giving a green card to national parliaments. Like I said, it's purely negative today. The implication of national parliaments in European policies is to say, no, no, no. I like more to hear from national parliaments what they want that the European Union is going to, in what direction they are going. Instead of saying no, 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 saying yes, this direction, this direction, this direction. Secondly, to give a right of initiative to the European Parliament, because we are the only bloody parliament in the world, sorry that I'm saying that in that words, that has no right of initiative. What is completely nuts, naturally, to have a parliament who has no right of an initiative. I don't want to make it too difficult for the European Commission today to talk about the delegated acts. I will not enter in that game. I agree on the remark that has been done. But our way of working with national parliaments will be that on the 24th of March, we will have a common proposal on all these issues. The influence of national parliaments and the role of national parliaments in European policies, in defense policy. If we have tomorrow a defense union, how you will manage that without the control of national parliaments where their troops will be involved. That needs to be involved, national parliaments. The same on European Parliament and the same on the policies that we want to go forward. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm pretty sure that for the first time, that was not happening in the convention, I can tell you, so many years ago. But for the first time, I think we are entering into an area when a European Parliament and national parliaments don't see each other as a sort of type of competitors, but on the contrary, as the voices of the citizens working into the same direction. And this direction is very clear, a brighter future for Europe and for the European Union. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you for those words, co-presidents. Yes, we are ready to work together. The Vice President of the Commission, please.
Chair, I was listening carefully to all of your interventions, and I'm really thankful to listen to have now to know what is your position. This is very important. First, on rules of procedure. So rules of procedure are for us very important because without having these rules of procedure, we wouldn't be able to lead this exercise. So this is first time ever that 3 institutions plus national parliaments plus citizens are working together. So in the end, I have to tell you, there is no voting in this exercise, no voting at all. So whatever we will agree will be in consensus. So there is no voting, although the only decision-making body is the executive board, where Guy, me, and at this moment French presidency are sitting together, and we will be obliged to come with this strong political declaration for the 9th of May. But our work does not stop on 9th of May. This is what I want to tell you. This is the reason why we have to stop with this listening, so-called listening exercise, because we need another part of our mandate, which is 2.5 years, in order to implement this. And this is the reason why we have to stop on 9th of May. I'm sure that we will be implementing what the major conclusions will be. Of course, I won't now dive into political issues or into right of initiative, but let's see what will be the final conclusions. I don't want to preempt anything because it's not on me, it's on all 3 institutions to come together on this. Of course, all of us want to build resilient Europe. You know that we have this new strategic compass. You know that President von der Leyen was from the first day for the integration of Western Balkans. So rest assured, we are in favor of this. I also want to say that we cannot continue in this exercise as business as usual, because the war which is ravaging at the moment in Ukraine made us think a little bit different and faster. You see, the sanctions were brought in 24 hours. This is first time that European Union really delivered that fast, which means that we can be faster when the situation is like this. So I'm sure that we will do a good job for European Union. Of course, without national parliaments, it is impossible. So, Mr. Kriegbaum, yes, we were in favor for having 108 of you in conference plenary because we think that national parliaments are really important. Of course, I don't want now to deliberate on green and orange card, but let's see what will be the final conclusion in the end. We always want to include not only national parliaments, but of course citizens. Many of you said that it would be disaster if we disappoint citizens in the end. So we mustn't disappoint citizens. Citizens have to see that their recommendations are taken into account in final conclusions. And this is what we promise to do. On follow-up, you heard what President von der Leyen said now in this video, but she said this at the beginning of her term in 2019 when she had her inaugural speech. She was, at that moment, in 2019, she announced Conference on the Future of Europe. This year, in September, during her State of the Union speech, she also reiterated that we will follow up. We are committed to follow up on what will be the conclusions of citizens. So I'm sure that we will not disappoint anyone. Of course, if some of these interventions will need treaty change, this is also to be debated. But we are trying to do everything within actual treaty. But if not, then we have to, of course, continue with this process. Some of you are mentioning convention. Yes, maybe one of the conclusions could be convention in the end. So I am not going to preempt because I'm only one of 3 co-chairs and I don't want to preempt anything, but we are ready, we are open. And I have to tell you, no democracy in the world has ever dared to do such an open exercise, and we did. we opened plenary hemicycle in Strasbourg to citizens together on an equal footing with their elected representatives. This has never happened. So this is European democracy, and we want to make it better. When we say we want to make it fit for the future, it's not slogan. We really have to make it fit for the future, taking into account what is going on our eastern borders. And of course, we have to find a way how to rethink enlargement policy. Yes, I agree with you. So Western Balkans cannot be dark or black hole in the stomach of European Union, but also Eastern Partnership should be also redefined and see how to go on with this. But it's not only Commission, all of us have to agree on this. So I want to thank you for your deliberation today. Be sure that we took note what you said, and I'm sure that we will take this in our final document. So 9th of May is not the end of this exercise. It's only strong political document from which many other policies will derive. So thank you very much for your deliberations, and we'll be in touch.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'd like to thank the two of you for having this discussion with us. I think this is essential, as you yourself said, Vice President, and it's a first. And it's important to have this debate so that we can take the European project forward and rise to the challenge that we face. We're a bit behind schedule, but I think we need a coffee. So 15 minutes. We'll start again at 11:20 here in the room.